From Fox 8 Sports, this is the Black and Gold Review Show, sponsored by your Southern Quality Ford dealers and the Ford F-Series, celebrating 42 years of truck leadership.
You hear that? That's 3,000 fans, loud and proud. Good evening and welcome into the Black and Gold Review Show. Saints Hall of Famer Deuce McAllister, our Hall of Famer Sean Vazan, I'm Juan Kincaid. What's the one thing from Sunday's win, Deuce, that told you about this team?
Well, they're able to bounce back. I think, from an offensive standpoint, they're very efficient. They can run the football. They can do some different things as far as winning a football game, and from a defensive standpoint, you're still a talented team. You haven't completely put it together. That's something that you have to continue to work on, and so that's what you want to continue to grow on.
Much bigger win than we're probably giving it credit for. To go 2-0 in the division, to improve the record that they've improved at, 3 straight wins. I think this was a sneaky big win for the Saints. Good effort all the way around.
All right, let's get you right to the headlines. Busy show tonight. Headline number 1, October success continues. If only they could play the Super Bowl in the month of October, they'd just hand the Saints the trophy because October is their month. If you count Sunday's 27-24 win over the Panthers, that makes 15 straight wins in this month for the Saints. They haven't lost an October game since October 2016 at Kansas City. Deuce, what is it about the second quarter of the season that brings out the best in this football team?
I think they have the kinks worked out of it. Once you talk about those first 3 or 4 games that you have to play in September, and then they know the sense of urgency of how they have to play. I think, another thing is guys really start to get into football shape. You play those first couple of games. You don't really play in the preseason, and then you come around, you play those first 3 or 4 games. You're not necessarily in football shape, and I think by the time October hits, they really are.
Yeah, I think it's all about knowing your team, knowing who you have, knowing their strengths, knowing your opponents. At that point, film has caught up to your opponents as opposed to the first 4 weeks of the season where other teams are also figuring out their identity, so you may not necessarily prepare for what they actually are, whereas into October, you kind of get a better sense of who a team is, and that's for the opponent and obviously the Saints themselves. They are 23-3. If you go back to 2014, 23-3 in the second quarter of the season. I mean, that's not an anomaly. This is Sean Payton. October, second quarter of the season, he figures it out.
Let me ask you this, Sean. Is there a greater sense of urgency in the second quarter than the third, or vice versa?
No, I think there's. As the season goes on, obviously, and you're still in it, the urgency only grows in the third and in the fourth quarter. But that second quarter, if you struggle that first quarter and in the second quarter you struggle, then your season's kind of done by the midway of the season. So I do think there is a sense of urgency in that second quarter. But I also believe it's just a matter of familiarity. You know who you are, and Sean Payton is a smart enough coach. By that point in the season, he knows how to, push and pull and find the right matchups and certain guys in certain situations to where it's all about just balling on Sundays.
What do you think, Deuce?
Well, I definitely think so. I think the other part of it also, when you talk about it, the health of a team as well. We've seen them have to juggle players around, and then, you get some new guys that are still filling their way through a system. That makes a difference in those first 3 or 4 games. By that second set of games, as far as the second quarter is concerned, they're a little bit more familiar. Maybe your guys are a little bit more healthy coming out of that training camp. So I think that's part of it. It all factors into play.
All right, headline number 2, Callaway answers the call. No Michael Thomas, no Emmanuel Sanders, no problem because the Saints had Marquez Callaway, who answered the call on Sunday, tying a team high with 8 catches for 75 yards. That was a team high, the yards for the game. Callaway, who wore the number 12 jersey, understood the significance of that number. Marcus Carlston used to wear it. His performance surprised you, Sean?
Look, they were looking for someone to step up, and given the effort he had the week before, a couple weeks before against the Chargers, it certainly felt like they were high on him. I went back and watched every single one of his catches, and they talked about it after the game. If you go back and watch it on film, he has a very good feel for zone coverage and how to sit in these holes and find these little openings, and Drew is obviously in sync with him in a pretty quick time frame. They've been high on him since training camp. I think you can see why. He's a very smart football player, and he's on the same page with Drew. And if you can find those holes in that zone coverage, you can get a lot of receptions, and that's exactly what happened.
I think one of the things that you see as a talented receiver that, under the tutelage of Curtis Johnson and Ronald Curry, he's only going to continue to get better. And I think that's, just finding and identify somebody that might work for your system. He's an undrafted young man. I thought he was talented enough at Tennessee to be a drafted player, but I think also finding the right system also helps him because, he's a guy that could probably play in this league as a 2, possibly as a 1. There's still some things that he needs to get better at, but in this system with the Saints, it fits him perfectly.
Deuce, is he the guy that benefits the most with Thomas and Sanders out?
Well, I think he benefits. I think also, though, a guy like Traquan Smith, because the coverage isn't necessarily going to be on you as far as the number 1 corner. It's not going to normally follow you, and so both of those guys are bigger body. They can probably bully a smaller defensive back, and I think, those are guys that, you want to have as your number 3 receiver.
Look, I think Callaway is a guy that certainly benefited from not having Sanders, not having Thomas, but he showed flashes when Sanders was available a couple weeks before when Sanders went off with that 12-catch performance. I think he's a guy that's earned some reps here, and even when those guys come back, Sean Payton's going to have to figure out a way to get him in the game here because I think he's a guy that's really shown he's a smart football player, understands what they're doing from a concept standpoint, and he's productive. The moment's not too big for him, so I think they may have uncovered a hidden gem here.
All right, headline number 3, Kamara plays to the crowd. With the Saints playing in front of fans for the first time, 3,000, no player enjoyed reminding them of what they'd been missing more than Alvin Kamara. He had his share of big touches against the Panthers, 14 carries, 83 yards, 8 catches, 65 yards. When the Saints needed a big first down, Kamara was usually the guy that Drew Brees looked to. Deuce, try as they might, teams just cannot stop this guy. Why is he so elusive, even when teams know that that's where the ball's going?
One, if this is what he does in front of 3,000, I can't wait.
Oh, yeah.
Let's just get him in front of 15 or 25,000. He's just been dynamic. And I think, when you talk about teams stopping him, I don't think teams realize how quick he is and how explosive he is, just not only as a receiver in the open field, but as a runner, just to be able to set some of those blocks up. And then, you're right there. He does an outstanding job of just finding that soft spot in that, that's a zone play, once that split zone, and he's able just to follow it right off the edge of it. And, he gets in space. He's special.
Sean, if Kamara continues on this offensive pace, should he be in the offensive MVP conversation?
Perhaps. He's going to have to, from a yardage standpoint, if he can keep this pace going and, and he flirts with those big-time numbers that McCaffrey had last year, perhaps. But, Deuce, have you ever seen a guy, it's like he slows guys down with his eyes. It's really something how he slow plays players and he's able to turn the corner on them where it doesn't look like, almost like he baits them into bad angles and he glides and he sets up blockers so well. He reads blockers so well. He's got great hands. Tight ropes that sideline with great ease. I mean, that 3rd and 14 he converted. Look, they were able to get it even with the review, and they got the spot, and it was a perfect play by him. But that's 3rd and 14. That was a check down. He's able to turn the corner and get 14 yards. He's just an impressive player, and I think he's hitting that point in his career where it's all coming together for him.
We see
the vision, the speed, the elusiveness. He just feels like he's one step ahead.
We see a huge difference in him, Sean, when he's healthy and when he's not healthy, don't we?
No doubt.
Headline number 4, defense exposed again. If there's a problem, it's on defense, where Dennis Allen's unit did not come out of the bye week playing better football. And once again, it goes back to the basics, a lack of communication. Deuce talks about it all the time on the back end. Missed tackles, no pass rush. Sean, why does this team continue to have trouble on defense with what seems like the simple things?
Yeah, I wish we could all figure it out, and it certainly felt like Sean Payton was asked that today, and he had an interesting response. I did think he was interesting where he said, if you'd have told me after training camp the unit we had the biggest trouble would be in the secondary, just what we foresaw coming out of training camp. And I agree. Deuce, I know you were there as well. That was the best position group in training camp. It is all falling apart. Whether it's communication, whether it's doing coverages that they're not, that's not their strengths, or it's just a matter of guys just aren't productive enough. At some point, something drastic has to change here, because that could have cost them against Carolina. It almost cost them against the Chargers as well. You got to figure it out, and it only gets tougher from here on out.
You're not going to continue to be able to be bailed out. What I mean by that is make up some of those mistakes, because the margin is going to be too great to overcome. And the disappointing part about this is you're talking about some talented players. These guys aren't, guys that are off the street as far as just street free agents that you pick up just at a whim. These guys are good football players. Some of those guys are drafted football players, and it's disappointing that they haven't figured it out. Some of the issues that are plaguing them right now.
Let's get to headline number 5: Bridgewater homecoming. Teddy Bridgewater coming back. It was almost a perfect homecoming for Teddy. 128.3 passer rating, his best of the season. His first trip back to the Dome since he left the Saints for the Panthers. And Teddy held his own. 254 yards passing, couple of scores. But he did take the big sack late in the fourth quarter. That was the difference in the game. Sean, Teddy play as you expected him to?
Exactly. I said it last week leading up to this game. He's a better version of himself. Last year, this is very clean, very efficient, very accurate, can make plays on the run. As you see right there, that was a terrific play by him right there. And if you give a coverage breakdown like we saw in the game in the second quarter, he'll make you pay with that dime he threw to DJ Moore. So you're talking about a player that's a legitimate starting quarterback that's in a very good system suited to his skills, very clean, very accurate, very efficient. He is exactly the player I thought he would be.
I agree, and the only thing that you're frustrated about is you had some opportunities to come up with a few more sacks, and, I can't say that you had your hands on a couple of footballs. He made the right decision, nearly every play, and so you're proud for Teddy. We're just happy that we got a W.
And he's doing a lot of things without Christian McCaffrey, who we're hearing may not be playing this week against Atlanta as well. All right, still to come on the Black and Gold Review, we'll head to the film room where Sean Vazan will break down a key moment from Sunday's win against the Panthers, and we'll continue answering your questions. We'll begin answering your questions then using the Final Play app and the Final Word feature. Stay with us. And be sure to subscribe to the Fox 8 Overtime podcast for more Saints analysis on demand. You can find our podcast on fox8live.com, the Final Play app, and wherever you listen and download your podcast.
You're watching the Black and Gold Review Show, sponsored by your Southern Quality Ford dealers and the Ford F-Series, celebrating 42 years of truck leadership.
All right, welcome back in. Time now for a little bit of film study, and for that, of course, we bring in Sean.
All right, well, the Saints made their one sack Sunday count. It came at the perfect time, fourth quarter, with the game on the line. It wasn't just the sack, but how much yardage was lost that was crucial. We break down the 4 parts of the play in this week's film study. Part 1, the alignment. Marcus Davenport is on the right side of the formation, standing up. Malcolm Jenkins is next to him on the outside, while Alex Anzalone is next to him on the inside. Part 2, the stunt. Anzalone and Davenport run a twist. Anzalone goes right, while Davenport loops behind him to pursue the space in the gap between the guard and the center, who's now blocking Sheldon Rankins. Part 3, the power. Once in the gap, Davenport completely overpowers fullback Alex Arma to smother Bridgewater, who has no chance of escaping. Part 4, the takedown. Once Davenport has Bridgewater firmly in his grasp, Bridgewater attempts to fall forward, but Davenport successfully pulls him backwards, placing him at the 47-yard line instead of the 46-yard line. This clearly mattered because on the very next play, Joey Sly attempted a 65-yard field goal and missed it by this much. So good for Davenport for coming up clutch on that play. He hustled for that tackle for loss on the screenplay right before that as well.
Matter of inches there, Deuce. Good play by Davenport, though, finally showing up on the stat sheet.
Yeah, definitely. He's been close to a couple sacks. The biggest thing for him is just to be healthy. And so just to have him healthy, anytime that he's matched up on a running back, he should win every time. I mean, actually, it's just a slide protection. And so they slid to Sheldon Rankins, as Sean alluded to. And so, it's either going to be a double on Cam Jordan or Sheldon Rankins. That time it was Sheldon. It's one-on-one on the backside. The back is matched up with your defensive end. That should be a win every time.
Okay, we'll leave it there. Still to come. The trade deadline is just 8 days away. Will the Saints make a move on Jameis Winston? We'll discuss that and answer some viewer questions next.
You're watching the Black and Gold Review Show, sponsored by your Southern Quality Ford dealers and the Ford F-Series, celebrating 42 years of truck leadership.
All right, welcome back into the Black and Gold Review. We've got a bunch of questions for you tonight, so let's get right to it. Submit it on the Final Play app using that final word feature. This first question comes from Randolph Cole and Vacherie. What's the deal with Michael Thomas, and what's up with all the injuries to him? I think he wants to be traded to another team. Deuce, I'll give you that first one there. Does Michael Thomas seem disgruntled, like he wants to play elsewhere, or it's just injuries happen?
I think injuries happen. I mean, I think, he was actually in the field of play when he had the high ankle sprain, so it wasn't like he was holding out and wanting to be traded to a different team. It's unfortunate that you don't actually get to see the hamstring injury as far as practice is concerned. So, you're always going to question that. Well, maybe he wants out, he's disgruntled. And so I think Mike wants to be a part of it. I think when you talk about a player being traded, anytime that you're not out there helping the team, some type of rumor is always going to fly. I think we'll just have to wait and see over the next week as far as what happens.
Yeah, him leaving practice right there, obviously, with the hamstring injury that forced him out of the game last week. This is all stemming, this question, I'm assuming, from that. I don't even know if I could call it a report. It was more like an open speculation from ProFootballTalk.com that basically said, wondering if the Saints are accepting calls for Mike Thomas, ? And it was a bunch of paragraphs. It certainly felt like Sean Payton shot that down over social media to that report, or whatever you want to call it. So look, it's been a frustrating season for Michael. So hopefully he gets healthy soon and he's back on the field and just get into that football repetition, because generally speaking, that soothes a lot of pain when you kind of just get into what you're good at and what you know. How
much do you, Sean, worry about or think back to the whole GJ thing that happened in practice between Thomas and him, and how it just seems like this guy really needs to be back on the football field right now? They say idle minds, he needs to be playing some football.
Yeah, possibly. I think it felt like that had been squashed. They did what they had to do. He accepted the discipline. They did what he had to do, and then he was on that First Take show in the background of Cam Jones' interview saying he was going to be back. Then obviously he aggravated the hamstring. So who knows? I know this Michael Thomas is likely a creature of routine, especially when it comes to football, given how hard he's always practiced, whether it was June minicamp or in training camp or obviously week to week. So hopefully he can get back on the field, start practicing, and start making plays for this team, because obviously they could use him.
Let's get to our next question here, coming in from Chris over in Slidell. Malcolm Jenkins is the reason the secondary blows coverage. It didn't happen when he wasn't here. Deuce, I really want your take on this one, because we've had discussions in the sports office that what people think is not really what's happening there.
I agree. Not necessarily what happens there. I mean, Malcolm hadn't played probably to his level that he had wanted to, so far with the Saints. But I'll tell you, all the blown coverages aren't all on Malcolm, and I'll just leave it at that. And you can kind of just watch more than just that raw image as far as him chasing that player in the end zone. There are a lot of issues that they have to get fixed, and there were issues last year, and they seemed to fix some of them. But at the end of the day, it's not all on 27. I think all of them, particularly on that back end, and even probably sometimes when the linebackers are supposed to be covering, in some areas, it's on those guys as well.
Yeah, two things can be true at the same time. Malcolm has not played to the level of his contract. He's probably not played up to his standards. I think we could all agree with that. But, I mean, there is no way you can blame him for all of the blown coverages. Pick a name in the secondary right now. Every single one of those guys have had issues. And I know, he wasn't here last year and he didn't have these issues. Now he's here and they're having these issues. I think that's a little bit of low-hanging fruit there to go after. I just think they got to focus. They got to play, and they've got to figure this thing out, because it's been mind-boggling to see how bad the secondary has become.
Sean Payton did say today it's a $6 million question as to why the same guys that played in this secondary last year, the veteran players, are having such struggles in that secondary this year. That's the biggest problem for this defense going forward right now. Hey, a week from tomorrow, the trade deadline happens for the NFL. Sean and Deuce, what are the chances Jameis Winston, the guy that holds the clipboard, is holding the tablet there, is playing with another team come this time next week?
So if I'm a GM and I get a phone call.
Is he attracted to you?
And a team says, hey, we'll give you a second-round pick for Jameis Winston. I'm strongly considering that deal. Now, I have no idea if he's someone, teams are inquiring about. I don't think the Saints would put him on the trade block. It would be more of other teams calling, because, hey, look, at that position, there's been injuries to that position, and he's a guy that's, certainly has starter experience. So if the right offer came along, I think I would consider it.
I think they'll consider all offers, particularly for a player that they, Jameis dresses, but he doesn't play. I know that they do like Jameis Winston, but just depending on the type of offer that they get, I think that they'll consider it, because you have to remember, Jameis is not signed long-term here in New Orleans, and so that's something that they have to also consider as well. And, I do believe if he did come back, as far as next year is concerned, that he would be in the running for the starting quarterback job, and that's considering if Drew doesn't come back. But I think, they would have to entertain it.
Okay. All right, we'll leave it there. Up next, the Buccaneers, they're rolling right now. They demolished the Raiders and will have Antonio Brown at their disposal for Week 9 against the Saints. We'll look at the growing challenge in Tampa Bay coming up.
You're watching the Black and Gold Review Show, sponsored by your Southern Quality Ford dealers and the Ford F-Series, celebrating 42 years of truck leadership.
All right, welcome back into the review show, and want to take a look real quickly at the NFC South standings there and how they're shaking out. After 7 weeks, the Bucs are still sitting on top with a 5-2 record, having played one more game than the Saints, who are 4-2 and in second. Carolina's 3-4 at third. The Falcons are being the Falcons. They're 1-6 right now. The Bucs, though, did something on Sunday that the Saints couldn't do back in Week 2. They beat Las Vegas handily. Tom Brady and that offense hitting its stride. He threw from 369 yards, 4 touchdowns, a 45-20 Tampa win. Deuce, not surprising, this Bucs team is night and day from the one that the Saints beat back in Week 1.
Not surprising at all. I mean, you knew the more time that they were together, the better they were going to get. They had some elite players. I mean, I think, in a couple weeks, that's going to be an outstanding matchup, and it's one that we'll worry about in 2 weeks. You got some business to handle this week against Chicago.
Quickly, Sean, Antonio Brown, room for him on that roster?
Clearly, Tom Brady wanted him, and they got him signed. There's a lot of weapons there in Tampa Bay. There's a lot of guys playing better, so we'll see how he fits in. I know this. He's a tough guy inside that locker room. We'll figure it out.
No doubt he's on a short leash there in Tampa Bay as well. It's going to do it for the Black and Gold Review Show. For Deuce, Sean, and everyone here at Fox 8, thanks for watching. Our next newscast is at 4:30 in the morning. Have a great night.
This has been the Black and Gold Review Show, sponsored by your Southern Quality Ford dealers and the Ford F-Series, celebrating 42 years of truck leadership.